Hello everyone, welcome back to the Gamer Coach. In today's video, we're going to be doing a settings guide for controller on Fortnite Project Era, which is currently patch.6.21. We're going to go into all the key controller related settings, and a lot has changed in Season 5, so you can't be carrying over your Season 5 settings because we now have a build and edit sensitivity multiplier, as well as proper custom binds, which totally changes the way you're going to play the game. Please note, you probably could transfer these settings to Nova without too many problems. I still would be careful about that, but modern Fortnite, no, don't even try. It's not going to work. So let's start off where your X and Y sensitivity should be in terms of your base sensitivity. Now, this is heavily personal preference. I'm just going to give you some of the logic behind how you can decide how to do it. In the last season, you could argue that, hey, we should jack up our sensitivity as high as possible because that's going to influence your building. And the higher sensitivity isn't on base is how your build sensitivity is going to be. But on the other hand, you want to be as low as possible because the lower it is, the better you're going to be able to L2 at range, because to L2 effectively, you need to hip fire a lot of the time and then last minute L2 to snap on a target and then shoot. So your targeting sensitivity wasn't that relevant. It was all done your base sensitivity. This season, however, I think that logic has really changed. Now you have a build sensitivity multiplier, so you're not really punished for running low sensitivity. So now you could argue that, hey, we should all throw our sensitivities lower and we just make it up in build sensitivity to help L2 better. And I 100% think that's true. For me, I'm not going to move it from 7.7. I've played on 7.7 for well over 5 years now, and it'd be very awkward for me to try and change it now. But if you're less locked into that sensitivity, I would actually try going a few ticks lower and see if that helps you. Now, it's heavily personal preference, right? Hip firing, aiming, not that the controller can do that very well anyway, but if you set it too low, it's going to be literally impossible to hip fire because you can't turn fast enough with your shotgun. So that is something to keep in mind. So it's still personal preference. Before I was saying, hey, you go as low as like maybe 0.6 all the way up to maximum. I think now that window's a bit lower, you could still run maximum, but I don't recommend that anymore. You're going to make it very hard for yourself to L2. I would maybe go 0.8, 0.9 at a maximum, and you could go as low as 0.5 to get that maximum aiming at mid to long range, but it's really down to personal preference, and you could go beyond those upper and lower limits if that's really how you like to play the game. It heavily depends. In terms of targeting sensitivity is not very important on controller. On keyboard and mouse, this is a key setting, but on controller, it doesn't matter because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be tapping L2 as you're shooting. So it's not like you're going to be holding L2 and actually utilizing your targeting sensitivity. If you're aiming down sights and aiming down sights while aiming, I gotta say, you're kind of doing it wrong. You really need to be using L2 to its maximum to be effective on controller. So this setting isn't that important. Just know it's a multiplier, so it heavily depends on your base sensitivity. But don't worry about this one. Obviously, I want to have it at maximum, but it's not a big deal. 0.7 is fine for me. It's kind of up to you. But again, don't stress over this one. Scope sensitivity matters a bit more. You can't effectively L2 with scoped weapons. Technically, with the scoped AR, you might be able to, but it's very awkward. I don't recommend trying that. In terms of snipers, you're going to want to obviously have it lower than your base sensitivity. But again, that heavily depends on your base. If you have a 1.0, to have the same effective scope sensitivity as me, you probably need to have that like 0.5. So you're just going to have to do the math on that. You just need to multiply these two numbers together to get your effective scope sense. But again, heavily depends on your base sensitivity, so that's up to you. Okay, building sensitivity, I don't actually run it this low long term. The reason why it's so low right now is because we started at 1.0 in last season because there was no multiplier, and I want to reach about 1.5 to 1.6 for me to be comfortable with it. So I'm just slowly putting it up 0.1 every day, so it's not such a drastic and jarring change. Again, this heavily depends on your base sensitivity. If it's lower, you need this to be higher. If your base is higher, this needs to be lower. Definitely have it above 1.0. Don't be reducing it. That's not good. You need higher sensitivity and build and edit. But again, this is a lot down to personal preference. So it's up to you what works for you. If you want to just get to your new sensitivity right away, you could just slap it way up to where you want it to be. If you want to have a more gradual change and not be completely terrible on the first day, you could do what I'm doing and slowly bring it up over time. Again, though, sensitivity is heavily down to personal preference, but I do think its general takeaways, lower sensitivity is a lot more viable than it was last season. You want to have your targeting and scope sensitivity below 1.0, obviously, and you need to build sensitivity above 1.0. After that, it's really up to you to decide what's comfortable for you. The only other controller setting that's key is Builder Pro Build Immediately. You need that on. What that does is if you go from wall to stair or stair to floor, you don't have to double click. If you're double clicking, Yikes, that's not good. You don't want to be doing that. So make sure this is on. This is basically a mandatory setting, and controller edit time should be completely irrelevant for you. And let me explain why. So controller, there's 3 ways you can use a controller. You can do it the standard grip, which means you're using your thumb to press your A, B, X, Y buttons, or the buttons equivalent on PlayStation. You could be using a claw grip, which means you use your second finger to press these buttons. Or you could use a paddle setup, where you're using paddles in your third and fourth, or fourth and fifth fingers to press buttons that are mapped to your paddles on your controller. Now for me, I use a paddle setup. I use an Elite Controller Gen 2, and I set all my paddles to the D-pad. The logic behind this idea is I never need to press the D-pad, and the D-pad is the hardest for me to press. So I'm just going to put all my key binds, like pickaxe, edit, switch mode, and reload, on the D-pad, and secondary binds like map and inventory on the face buttons, as they're easier to hit than the D-pad. This way, I never have to take my thumb off the stick at any point in the fight, because I don't need my secondary binds during a battle, and it's a lot easier to hit those secondary binds if for whatever reason I do need to hit that map or inventory during a battle, right? But most of the time, I'm not taking my thumb off the stick. Now, if you're playing on a standard setup, you're going to have to take your thumb off the stick. That's just an inevitable reality. Doesn't mean you can't be good on a standard setup, but it is a disadvantage that you do need to keep in mind. So, again, this is really going to depend on which of those 3 setups you use. If you use a claw or standard, you need your key binds on A, B, X, Y. If you use paddles, it depends on how you set up your paddles, so it's really up to you. There's a couple things though that are really important in these settings that I should tell you about so you don't make this mistake. 1, you need an instant edit button. You do not want to have switch mode / edit, because what that's going to do is it's going to force you to hold the button to edit. You basically never want to have button holds. Button holds are inherently slow and not good. So you need to bind the edit to something. Some people like to put it on down and left stick. That's totally fine. Some people put it on a face button. Some people, use a paddle. It doesn't really matter what it is. As long as it's easy to hit and it's an instant edit button, that's totally fine. The second thing, you don't want to have crouch / repair. You want to have just crouch, because if you have crouch / repair, the game is going to check if you're holding the button to repair. And as I said, button holds are not good. So just unbind repair altogether, or move repair to another button. You don't even need repair, honestly. It's nice to have, but not a big deal if you don't have it. So make sure you just have crouch, so that way when you press the button, you're crouching immediately. Think of it like a pump versus charged shotgun. Remember how clunky the charged shotgun was? That's basically what you're doing if you're using crouch / repair or switch mode / edit. You're just making it unnecessarily awkward for yourself, so just don't do that. In terms of your build sensitivity, make sure you're using Builder Pro setup, obviously. If you're using Combat Pro or you're doing like the next piece previous, please stop. That's not good. Switch over as soon as you can. Your gameplay will improve drastically within a week. Placing traps I still find a bit unreliable on controller, so take my binds with a grain of salt here. It doesn't work half the time. I can't quite explain why. It's been working more consistently though than Season 5 where it just didn't work at all. So you just need to mess around with this until you get it to work reliably. Same rules. Make sure you have crouch, not crouch / repair, and make sure you have an edit button in build mode. Some people don't have an edit button in build mode. I mean, yes, it stops you from pre-editing if you don't have it, but sometimes you just need to edit through that wall while you're in build mode. So I highly recommend you do have an edit button within this mode. Finally, edit. Again, the crouch rule, same thing. It can be helpful to have your confirm button as different than your edit button, because you're basically creating double edit binds. At the very top level, that's going to make you faster, but for most of us, it's not really going to matter that much. On controller, we're already going to be editing slow compared to keyboard and mouse. Is it a slight advantage? Maybe. It's not the biggest deal. If you're running a single edit bind, I wouldn't worry about it too much. You're going to be fine. If you're trying to out-edit people on controller, unless you're significantly better than them, that's not a good bet. You should be trying to L2 them with the hand cannon, L2 them with AR at medium to long range. If you're trying to get into build fights and box fights, yes, you have to do it sometimes, but that's not where controller is going to shine. One more thing to note is that the game loves to put useless binds in build to edit mode. Like, it's like, oh, you need squad comms, and, oh, you need replay last mode. Just unbind all this crap in build and edit mode. Just go back to regular mode if you want to emote or you want to, access your map. You don't need that stuff in build and edit mode. You're just creating unnecessary risk of pressing the wrong button. If you need to access your map, click one button to switch mode and go back to build or standard mode. If you unbind this stuff, you're just reducing the risk of making mistakes. So just to quickly summarize, here's what you need to know. In terms of base sensitivity, lower sensitivity is a lot more usable now because you have a build sensitivity multiplier. So if you'd like to give it a try, you could lower your base sensitivity just a little bit to be able to L2 more effectively at range. Targeting sensitivity, not important. Scope, you want that below 1.0, and build, you want that above 1.0. A lot of this is personal preference though. For controller binds, you want to have an instant edit bind, you want to not have crouch slash repair, and you don't want to have switch mode slash edit. Get rid of that. You want to just have crouch and switch mode by itself. In build mode, you want to make sure you have crouch again, and you want to get rid of all the unnecessary crap it's going to try and give you, like inventory. In build mode, you don't need that. And then in edit mode, again, make sure you have crouch. You could consider a double edit bind, but not absolutely essential. And again, unbind all the garbage it's going to try and give you. Alrighty then, so thank you for watching this video. I hope this helps you, and I will see you in the next Gamer Coach video.